Hi, this is Bill Watkins. For a couple of weeks now, we've been talking about marriage from God's perspective. We began in Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 24, where he says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh." That idea of cleaving or being inseparably joined or holding fast is the idea of what marriage is about, that we don't let each other go. But when it comes to letting each other go, the Pharisees were trying to, at one point to put Jesus on the horns of a dilemma, and they asked him a question in verse 3 of Matthew chapter 19. The Pharisees came up to him and tested him by saying, "Is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause?" Now, at the time that Jesus lived, there were two rabbinical schools that had different views about how that was supposed to be. There was one school that said you could divorce your wife for any reason at all. If she burned the bagels, if you didn't like her. They had a whole set of things. If she talked loud enough for the people next door to hear her, you could divorce her. If she twirled in the street, you could divorce her. There were all sorts of reasons you could divorce her, and they gave all sorts of backing behind their arguments. On the other side, there was another school of thought that said, no, you can only divorce your wife if she has committed adultery. Now, you can imagine which one was more popular in the days of Jesus, but the Pharisees at this point didn't really care. It's just that whichever side Jesus took, they were going to use the arguments of the other side so that they could make Jesus look bad. But Jesus did something they did not expect. He answered, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? They are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." Jesus went behind the arguments of the rabbinical schools all the way to the beginning. And he said, listen, God puts people together in marriage, and what God has put together, man should not take apart. That's what he's saying. Don't divorce. It's better not to divorce. Well, that shocked them. So they said to him, "Why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away?" In other words, Moses did have a regulation about divorce, and if you were going to divorce somebody, that you would give them a certificate of divorce that they could say, "I've been divorced." Jesus said, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so." He said the reason that Moses allowed you to do this and he made you give a certificate of divorce is because you were already divorcing your wives anyway. At least it gave her some protection. But that was because of the hardness of heart that he allowed that. But God didn't intend that from the very beginning. He said, go back to the beginning. They're supposed to hold fast to their wife. And then he said, "And I say unto you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her when she's put away commits adultery." Well, that was shocking. Even his disciples says, if such is the case with a man, it's better for a man not to marry. And he said, not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it's given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it. In other words, if you can't live with this law about marriage, don't get married. Maybe if you're going to go to heaven and you can't be faithful, maybe you ought not get married at all. That's the point that he's making, but here it is. He says, except for the cause of fornication, a person can't divorce and remarry biblically. They can't divorce and remarry and have the help and the blessing of God in that. And whoever marries her when she's put away commits adultery. He had a very strict view of marriage, and it goes all the way back to the beginning. Marriage is so sacred that there's nothing, as we looked last week, that's closer to the relationship between Christ and the church than the relationship between a husband and a wife. And because it holds that relationship as a picture, God puts some very strict restrictions on it. Somebody says, "I don't understand why it should be so strict. I think if a woman or a man are cruel to one another, they should be able to marry somebody who's not so cruel." I sometimes agree with that thought, but it's not biblical. Biblically, the only grounds for divorce and remarriage are fornication, and that means sexual uncleanness. There is no honorable way to end a marriage without something dishonorable having happened. So here's what I want to ask you to do. Just rule divorce out of your vocabulary. When you're arguing, when you're disagreeing, don't use divorce as a trump card, because all that does is destroy you and destroy your marriage. Instead, make your marriage an absolute and then work your way through it. Dig deep and work your way through it. Thanks for watching.